All right. Maseches Kesubos. We are now in the second Masechta in Seder Nashim, after we've gone through Brachos, all of Seder Moed, Maseches Yevamos, and now Maseches Kesubos, which, as the name suggests, deals with the laws of the marital contract, the Kesuba. The Masechta discusses in great detail the halachos pertaining to marriage in general, the second part of marriage, which we'll talk about in a moment, the different parts of marriage. But the Masechta details the process of actually getting married. So from the time that you have completed the stage of kiddushin, to now going to the chuppah, joining the home together, the obligations that a man has to his wife and the wife has to her husband, which are outlined in great detail in the fifth and sixth parak of Kesubos. The Masechta also discusses the halachos of Sheva Brachos and the like, really all of the laws of marriage. The Agadada in the Masechta, the stories found in the Masechta, all surround the mitzvah of living in the land of Israel, all about Eretz Yisrael. So, there's a famous Masorah from the Gra. The Gra said that all the Agadadas in the Masechta, they directly relate to any of the halachos in the Masechta, meaning that the Agadada matches up with the basic theme of the Masechta. So how does Eretz Yisrael match up with Kesubos? So I heard from my Rabbi, David Hirschlita, he said that Klal Yisrael in our marriage to HaKadosh Baruch Hu took place when we were standing at Har Sinai. When we stood at Har Sinai, and God was kaf aleim hahar kegigis, as the Gemara tells us in Shabbos on Peiches, that God lifted the mountain over our head like a barrel, and He said that if you accept the Torah mutav ve'imlav sham tieh kfuraschem, that He's going to drop the barrel on us, and that was it. So that the mountain hanging over us, according to some of the Mefarshim, was like a chuppah, was like a wedding canopy, and that was our marriage to Hashem, the commitment that we made to Hashem and to His Torah and to His way and to His people. That all happened when we accepted the Torah. So then where was the ksuba? Meaning that where's the dowry? The same way that the husband, when he marries his wife, needs to make a financial commitment, that it's a two-way agreement, that the same way that the wife is going to provide certain things for the husband, so too the husband needs to provide for the wife. So, and needs to guarantee that he'll take care of her. So where's the guarantee for us? So that we know from Avram Avinu, that Avram Avinu was guaranteed that our Yerusha, our national dowry, is the land of Israel. And that's why Eretz Yisrael, all the Agadadas about Eretz Yisrael, is contained within Maseches Kesubos.
Does that mean that we got divorced at the first temple? Remarried at the second temple?
What?
We got divorced in the first temple, remarried in the second temple, and now
Eretz Yisrael. We never lost Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, we did.
No, we
Even
didn't.
the sanctity of the land was lost, right?
No, not according to the Rambam.
According to, at least there's some opinions that
according to the Ravid,
like Truma and Maisa is now the Rabbanan.
But even if the kedusha was even if on some level that may be true, but the promise that God has made to the Jewish people never goes away. That's exactly what Tosfos says in Masechah Shabbos. Here, let me get the Tosfos. Masechah Shabbos.
Nope. We'll get something else.
Says, hold on, give me 1 second.
We get the mango.
We're talking about another sparkling water.
Oh, definitely get a sparkling water, yes.
The Gemara says in Masechah Shabbos that it says that Chus avos tama, that we have lost the chus avos, the merit of our forefathers. So Tosfos in Shabbos, I think it's Daf Nun Gimel or Nun Hey. Let me see. Daf Nun Hey and Aleph. The Gemara says, "V'Shmuel Amar Tama Zechus Avos," that we've lost our Zechus Avos, the merit of our forefathers. Omer Rabbeinu Tam.
He's taking a break to get food.
Rabbeinu Tam never takes a break. Tell him Rabbeinu Tam never takes a break. Omer Rabbeinu Tam says the following: "This chus avos tama, that even though we may have lost the chus avos, aval bris avos lo tama. However, the promise that God made to our forefathers, we will never lose. The promise that Hashem is going to give us Eretz Yisrael, that's never, ever going to be lost." So
we're not living in sin if you're living there now, then, because that was my next thing. You were living unmarried if we got divorced.
Yeah, no. That's Purim Torah, Gavin. That's Purim Torah. Okay. So,
I don't know.
Okay, so now it's important for us to talk about exactly how marriage works in Jewish law. So the first step of marriage is shidduchin, is that is what we would refer to today as engagement. The couple, the families made a commitment that this couple is going to get married to one another, or them as individuals make such a commitment. That's called making the shidduch. It comes from the Gemara. And after that point, then the chasan does a kinyan, which we'll talk about when we learn Maseches Kiddushin. But he makes a kinyan, makes an acquisition called Kiddushin, where he sanctifies, makes sacrosanct his wife to be only permitted to him, and to the exclusion of every other man in the world, and that is through her acceptance of the ring. And we'll talk about the different ways of Kiddushin probably when we get to Maseches Kiddushin in a couple weeks. But that is what Kiddushin is that is the acquisition. So at that point, technically you're married, right? She can't be with any other man. There's only one person for her, and that is the person that she accepted the ring from. That's Kiddushin. Back in the times of the Gemara, the Kiddushin took place about 12 months prior to the Nisuin, which is what the Gemara in the beginning of Maseches Kesubos deals with.
You have to watch, Cheryl. So
the Kiddushin took place about 12 months before the Nisuin. The Nisuin is the second point of marriage, and that is the Chassan bringing the Kala into the home as husband and wife, and that's exactly what the Gemara tells us. The Mishnah tells us in our Masechta on Daf Mem Ches. The Mishnah says the following. La'olam hi b'reshus ha'av, that she is considered under the domain of her father, ad she tichnas l'reshus habal l'nisuin, until she comes into his domain, and that is called nisuin. That is basically the father giving up his dominance over her to the husband. She moving into the house, that is, or given over to the messengers that are going to bring her to the house. That's what the Mishnah's example is. That is called nisuin. Today, there's a whole discussion in the Rishonim exactly what that process has to look like. Either it's with a chuppah, or it's yichud, or it's a specific type of yichud, or it's bedekin. That's what Tosfos in Yuman Daf Yud Gimel says. We today do all of them. There's like 6 different opinions found in the Shulchan Aruch as to what we do for nisuin. So we do all of them in a modern wedding today. And we don't have the 12-month break between Kiddushin and Nisuin today. Today we do it all in one shot. So the first step is the Kiddushin. You do then the chuppah, yichud, etc. And the Sheva Brachos. Now, the Sheva Brachos is a separate inyan. The Sheva Brachos, the Brisa tells us that Kala Blo Bracha Asur Labala Kanida, that a marriage needs to begin with the Sheva Brachos, and without the Sheva Brachos, it would be prohibited for the two of them to live together. The Sheva Brachos, though, is a separate inyan. The Gemara tells us on Daf Zayin that the reason for the Sheva Brachos is because we need to take a moment here to recognize the value of this relationship and to recognize the great gift that Hashem has bestowed upon this couple and on the Jewish people for this marriage coming together. So that has to happen at the time of the chuppah, because the Gemara refers to it as birchos chasanim bebeis chasanim. That the birchos chasanim, the blessings of the chasan of the Sheva Brachos, should take place bebeis chasanim, in the house of the chasan. And the chuppah is
why isn't this in Kedushin?
Yeah.
Why isn't this in Kedushin?
Why is Nisuin not in Kedushin?
Why isn't this all this content in the Kedushin?
Kedushin really strictly deals with the legal aspect of the first part of marriage. This is all
okay, so it doesn't do the Nisuin.
Yeah, this has to do with Kesubos. Now, why would Kedushin not come before Kesubos? That the Rambam deals with in the Parish Mishnayos, because essentially the husband needs to know what he is committing to. So that's what Kesubos is doing before Meseches Kiddushin, because it all is outlined in the Kesubah.
And then, which stage do you get the Kesubah? In the first stage, right?
You get the Kesubah in between the first and second stage.
So when there was a year gap, when would you get the Kesubah?
At some point in between in that 12-month period, which is why they had the 12-month break. The 12-month break was so that the chassan had an opportunity to get his financials in order.
Okay.
To get the
financials if your marriage ended during the break,
marriage. What?
If the wedding or the marriage ended during this break, like after the first stage,
you need a get.
Oh, you do need to get. Okay.
Yeah, you need a get. So
and you need to pay your ketubah, 200 zuz.
Yeah. So the first Mishnah uses a little bit of a different language. This is what I wanted to point out tonight. That Tosfos points out there's a different language that's used for the first Mishnah in Kesubos than the first Mishnah in Kiddushin. The first Mishnah in Kiddushin is Ha'isha niknes b'shlosha drachim, that the woman is acquired through three different ways, kesef shtar ubiyah. But the language over here in the beginning of Kesubos is a little bit different. It doesn't say hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. No, not the beginning of Kiddushin. I meant the second parak of Kiddushin. The second parak of Kiddushin, it says, well, let's just pull it up instead of guessing.
Rabbi, you're supposed to know this.
Yeah, I should, right? So here, the
second parak.
Right over here. Second parak. Ha'ish mekadesh bo ubishlucho, that a man could get married with either himself or through a shliach. So it says Ha'ish mekadesh. Why by Kesubos then does the first Mishnah, when it talks about her getting married, it says besula nises? Why doesn't it put it in the why doesn't it use the following language as Tosfos? It says Basula Nises Liyom Ravi. Why doesn't it say, Tosfos asks, why doesn't it say Ha delokatani no sinesa basula? Why doesn't it put it in the masculine? Why does it put it in the feminine? It says Basula Nises, put it from the perspective of the girl. In Kiddushin, it puts it from the perspective of the man. Ha'ish Mekadesh es bo bishlucho. Right? Here,
my answer is that it's because this is from the perspective of the woman, right? The reason she's getting married on the fourth day is because she's a betula or a basula, depending on how you pronounce it.
Okay, Tosfos doesn't give that answer. Tosfos
gives wrong.
Tosfos gives two answers over here. So Tosfos' two answers are the following. Tosfos says, the reason that we don't use the language over here of in the masculine of that he is marrying this girl, this basula, like it says Ha'ish Mekadesh, is because Lafi Sha'ata Mekater Yoser, because you use less language, meaning Nosin Esa Basula, it's an extra word. So Rabbi was so careful with all of his words, he didn't want to waste use any extra words. So it's shorter to say Basula Nises. The same way Ha'ish Mekadesh is only 2 words. This is only 2 words. Okay. The second answer of Tosas is quite interesting though. Tosas' second answer is Va'od Di'i Tana Hachi, because if it would have written Nosin Esa Basula Hava Amina, I would have thought Afilu Ba'al Karcha, that I could even marry her against her will. Why would I think such a thing? Why would I think that you could do nisuin against her will? Right? Well, I don't understand Tosas' answer over here. Why would anyone have a havamina? You could do nisuin against her will. Furthermore, so then if that's the case, that using the language, putting it in the masculine, will give a connotation that you could even do this part of the ceremony against her will. So then why doesn't it give that same connotation by Ha'ish Mekadesh Bo B'Shlucho? Afilu Ba'al Karcha, even against her will, you should be able to do Kiddushin. So what's going on over here in Tosas? What's this answer in Tosas? So I want to discuss a concept. By
the way, the fact that you've already, because Kedushin comes after Ketubos, would you say that you've already established that it's not against the will in Ketubos? So you don't worry the second time to say.
But the Gemara doesn't establish that in Kesubos.
I thought that Tosafos says that the reason it is written that way is to show that it's not against the will.
But that's not enough. An inference is how I know that I can't just based on an inference.
Not forced.
What?
Just because the nisuin is not forced doesn't mean that the kedushin, can't be.
It's a kal v'chomer.
No, well, no, it's not a kal v'chomer, but
no,
so okay, I don't disagree with you, Jacob. I don't disagree with you, but I don't. You can't do either Ba'al Karcha. You can't do either against her will.
Yeah, and this is.
But why would I think just because it says no sin as a basula that it would mean that I can do it against her will? By kiddushin, the Gemara establishes that I'm not able to go against her will. Okay, and it uses the language of Ha'ish Mekadesh. Now, Ha'ish Mekadesh should also give off the same implication that I could do it against her will. If it's putting it in the masculine. So my Rabbi of David Hirsch Lita is one of the Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. So he wanted to point out that maybe these 2 answers in Tosfos, these 2 answers about why this type of language is used, either Tosfos says because Rabbi HaKadosh simply wanted to use shorter language, or it's that we could have a havamina that that nisuin can be Ba'al Karcha. So Tosfos clearly is not assuming that you would have the havamina that you could do kiddushin Ba'al Karcha. No one would have an inkling that you could do kiddushin Ba'al Karcha. However, you would think such a thing by nisuin. The first answer is not assuming that. The first answer doesn't like the second answer. That's why there's a second answer, right? So what are these 2 opinions in Tosfos arguing about? The inferred opinion that no one could ever imagine that a person could ever do kiddushin against her will. I'm sorry, nisuin against her will. And then the second opinion in Tosfos is that one would have a havamina that you could do nisuin against her will. What are these 2 opinions arguing about? So Rav Hirsch wanted to say maybe they're arguing about how you define nisuin. Is nisuin simply the gemar kinyan, the completion of the process you started with kiddushin, meaning kiddushin that took place 12 months ago separated her as that she's usher to everyone else and she's only muteris to you. She's your wife. That's what happened when you did kiddushin, when you gave the ring. Now Nisuin, which is you bringing her into your reshus, bringing her into your home, Nisuin now is really just the completion. It's the Gemar Kinyan. It's the end of the process that started 12 months ago. Or is Nisuin a Kinyan of Ne'atzmo? It's its own acquisition. That there are two acquisitions that need to take place for marriage. There's Kiddushin and Nisuin, two completely separate things. So if you assume that Nisuin is simply a stopgap, it's a Hasaras Homonea, it's removing the stopgap, it's that the Kiddushin needs to be completed. So then if that's the case, since she accepted the Kiddushin, she accepted the ring, since she's already quote unquote married to you, like Gavin, you pointed out before that she would need a get if the marriage didn't work and they didn't want to move forward with Nisuin, she still needs a get. So then if that's the case, one could envision why potentially you could even do that second part, Baal Karcha. Because there's nothing really you're doing. You're just bringing her into your reshus, but she already agreed to it. Like it's already been all settled. You just have to finish it up. But if you assume that Nisuin is its own Kinyan, so if it's its own Kinyan, so then it, just like Kiddushin wasn't able to be done by Karchach, so for Nisuin, standing alone on its own needs to be done with Das. It's a Kinyan. Every Kinyan needs to have Das. A Das Kona and a Das Makne. That you need to have foreknowledge. You need to understand what's going on. But if Nisuin is not a Kinyan, so then maybe you don't need to have Das for it. This is what Rav Hirsch wants to suggest. And we find even some rayos that this is what Nisuin is. We find proofs in the Gemara that Nisuin is really the completion of a Kinyan that already took place. Take a look at the Gemara over here. The Gemara has that, let's say a person wants to do Kiddushin Bitnai. They want to do the first part, the betrothal on condition. What's the condition? Let me find the Gemara. This is Kesubos in our Masechta on Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. The Gemara says
Doesn't speak to her father, right, or something. Doesn't go to her father's house.
Here the Gemara has where'd it go? I just had it before. Hold on.
The top.
Okay, here we go. Ha'omer li'isha. He says to a woman, Harayat Mekudeshes li, you are married to me. Al menah she'ein laich alai she'er ksusa ve'ona. On condition that you have no claim upon me for food, clothing, relations, physical aspects of the marriage. I don't owe you anything. Okay, so essentially, he wants to get married on condition that he doesn't owe her anything. Okay, so basically, he's getting rid of the basic portions in the ksuba, aside for the financial component of that. He would have to give her a certain amount of money if they get divorced. But all the things that are committed to in the ksuba for the marriage itself, he is not responsible for. Okay, he wants to get out of these things. All right, but I can't imagine a marriage that starts out that way is going to be quite successful. But what if such a scenario were to take place? Says the Brisa further, Harezu Mekudeshes, they are married. Utneo batal, meaning the Kiddushin worked. However, the Tanai is null and void because it's ridiculous, because it goes against a Tanai from the Torah, Divrei Reb Meir. However, Rabbi Yehuda says, Bedavar shebemamon Tanai kayam, that the Tanai about the monetary aspects of the Ksuba, then the Tanai would work. Okay.
So it's void because you can't say, I'm not going to wear. I'm not going to. Yeah. What's it good? I'm going to eat non-kosher. Right? You can't void a Torah mitzvah.
That's right. meaning
okay.
there's a commandment upon you. This is not up to her. Okay, this has already been imposed by the rabbis, or according to some opinions in the Rishonim, there's a steer in the Rambam about whether this might even be Doraisa. Okay, so now, listen to this. This is unbelievable raya from Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik pointed out from this Gemara that you clearly see from this Gemara that Nesuin is the finishing off of Kiddushin. Why? Because when does She'er Ksus and Ona kick into a marriage? It doesn't kick in with Kiddushin. It only kicks in with Nesuin. So how is it shaykh to make a Tanai? How is it shaykh to make a Tanai on items that aren't in play over here? This is Kiddushin you're doing. And if Nesuin was a kinyan of Ne'atzma, was its own kinyan, then all of these things can't be discussed until you get to Nesuin. You hear? Versus now by Kiddushin, if you assume that Nesuin is just the completion of Kiddushin, then these things are in play by Kiddushin. Right? So this Gemara is a straight raya, said the Rav, that Nesuin is really just the completion of Kiddushin. There's a few more rayas that point in the direction of Nesuin being the completion of Kiddushin. For example, take a look at this Ramah. Rav Hirsch pointed to this Ramah over here. So the Ramah says, this is in the halachos of Nesuin and Siman Samach Beis in Even HaEzer. The Ramah says that you make the Sheva Brachos. You make Asher Bara. Okay, Birchos Erisin and Birchos Chasanim. Omrim Osa al Shtei Kosos. Says the Shulchan Aruch that there are two brachos, right? There's Birchos Erisin, the bracha on the first part of the marriage, on the Kiddushin, on the Erisin, and Birchos Chasanim, that's the Sheva brachos. You say it Omrim Osa al Shtei Kosos, on 2 cups of wine, meaning there's 1 cup for the Birchos Erisin and 1 cup for the Birchos Chasanim, which is exactly what we do at a wedding. We have we have the cup that we use for the Kiddushin, and then we make another Brei Priagafen on the Nesuin. Afilu Makadesh B'Shas HaChuppah. Even if the Kiddushin takes place at the Chuppah, you still make 2 separate Brei Priagafens. That's what the Shulchan Aruch points out. Says the Ramah, Noagin lahafsik b'neihem b'kriyas haksuva. But the minhag is that we make a divide, we make a hefsik between the Kiddushin and the between the Kiddushin and the Nesuin, we make a hefsik. Why does the Ramah point out that we make a hefsik over here? We read the ksuba between the Kiddushin and the Nesuin in order to make a hefsik. Why is he pointing this out? This is a din in Hilchos Brachos. It's a hefsik, meaning that we want to obligate a second Brei Priagafen, right?
So you need a hefsek.
In order to obligate a second Brei Priagafen, we need to have a hefsik. Just like any other Hilchos Brachos. If I have a hefsik in my Su'uda, I need to make a new bracha, right?
Mm-hmm.
So points out Rav Hirsch. It's amazing. He says that why do I need to have a hefsik? If Kiddushin and Nesuin are 2 completely separate kinyanim, so I don't need a hefsik. They require 2 separate kosos. But if Nesuin is just the completion of Kiddushin, so then it would make sense why the Ramah, if he wants you to make a new Brei Priagafen, it would make sense though, then why you need to have a hefsik. Because you need to have a break in order to be machayev of the Brei Priagafen. Because otherwise they're not 2 separate things. It's a completion of the same thing. So there's a number of different rayas. We're not going to get into all the rayas right now, but what I wanted to do now was I wanted to move to we're still good on time. I wanted to move to the Rambam and the way the Rambam defines chuppah, which help us define a lot exactly, again, the difference between kiddushin and nisuin. Let me just go grab my Rambam. 1 second.
Is there a Rambam on Merkava?
Okay. So in terms of the definition,
This is the Ramah, is that correct?
is the Ramah, yeah.
So this is in the Shulchan Aruch.
This is in the yeah, the bold, the regular font, I mean, is Shulchan Aruch, and then the italics.
Oh, he's italics. Okay.
Okay. So the Rambam famously writes in Perek Yud Halacha Aleph of Hilchos Ishos. The Rambam writes that chuppah yichud habe. That chuppah is the definition of chuppah. The definition of nisuin is yichud, is being in seclusion for enough time in order for you to consummate the marriage. This is what the Rambam writes famously. There is a very difficult question that's raised by the Beis Yaakov. The Beis Yaakov was written by Hagaon Yaakov Milisa, same author as the Nesivos Hamishpat, the Nesivos, the same author as the Mekar Chaim, and many other amazing works. The Nesivos, the Beis Yaakov had a difficult personal life. A really hard personal life, but he was a prolific author in Yani Halacha. Rav Schechter likes to say that that the Nesivos and the Pnei Yoshua are probably the two svarim that are quoted most often by poskim. They are the two most popular svarim. Rav Schechter likes to say. So the Beis Yaakov asks a difficult question on the Rambam. That if you're going to assume that nisuin is defined by yichud, by that seclusion, and that seclusion needs to be ra'ui lebia, it needs to be one that has the potential to have relations, and that so it defines you actually living together. So he says that the first Mishnah in Yuma points out that the Kohen Gadol needs to be married in order to be avodah on Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
That's right. The Kohen Gadol needs to be married. There's a machlokas in the Mishnah whether or not we set up a backup wife for him. Right. Rabbi Yehuda says ein ledavar sof. That you set up one backup wife, you're going to need a backup for the backup, and then a backup for the backup. Right. It's impossible, and it's based off of the pasuk. That ubeado ba'abeso beso zu ishto, that the Kohen Gadol does the avodah on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael, ba'ado ba'abeso, even to his home, meaning that he has to be married, but beso zu ishto. So what would happen according to in the Mishnah, assuming that you do set up a backup wife for him? So Shema says the Mishnah, Gabe Kohen Gadol misaknin lo isha acheres Shema tamos ishto, and just in case his wife dies, you have a backup. Wife. So there's a machlokas in the Gemara. Eich mekadesh ve'ose kiddushay shnia im ose tnai kodem kedei shelo ye shnei batim. He can't be married to more than one woman. So if that's the case, you need to have set up that the kiddushin is going to be chal on Yom Kippur itself. Basically, the kiddushin, the nisuin, you do it all in advance with the second woman, but it's all on Tanai if my first wife dies. Okay? So asks the Beis Yaakov that according to the Rambam, then it's not going to work. Why? Because on Yom Kippur, it's usher to have yichud. Meaning, it's usher to have relations. It's usher to have yichud haroy labia. You can have yichud with your wife, but in order to have yichud that's going to work for Nesuin, it needs to be roy labia. On Yom Kippur, you can't have bia. So what would you do in such a scenario? So according to Rambam, how's it going to work? So this is what the
How come the Gemara doesn't say that?
Why doesn't the Gemara ask that question?
Yeah, like I remember there were like all these weird scenarios where like there was a long discussion in the Gemara on how you could make sure you're only married to one woman at a time, but yet still be married to her if your wife dies on Yom Kippur.
So that's exactly what the question of the Beis Yaakov is assuming. Clearly, this Gemara is not assuming that chuppah is defined by yichud haroy.
Okay.
That's the kasha that the Beis Yaakov is asking.
Okay.
Rav Naftali Trupp, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Chavetz Chaim's yeshiva. Chavetz Chaim was Rosh Kolo. Rav Naftali Trupp was the Rosh Yeshiva. He was the Maggid Shir. One of the most famous Maggidei Shir in all of Europe. They say that the three most revolutionary Maggidei Shir were Rav Naftali Trupp, Rav Shimon Shkup, and Rav Chaim Soloveitchik were the three most revolutionary Maggidei Shir. They completely changed the way that we analyze the Gemara. So Rav Naftali Trupp asked from the Gemara from the Mishnah we just saw before. Remember the Mishnah said, what's the definition of Nesuin? Of her coming into your home.
Mm-hmm.
Not defined by Yichud Aroy Labia. Why does the Rambam say that Nesuin is defined? Let me get that. Let me try pulling up the Rambam on the shared screen.
Is the Rambam in here?
I had issues with, that's why I didn't use the Markava. I've had issues with their Rambam before. So let me just see.
They're obviously Ashkenaz, Rabbi.
Let's see if it comes.
Looks fine.
Oh, okay, here we go. Arusa asur labala medivrei sofrim kolzman shehi bebeis avia. That you're not allowed to be with your arusa, with the woman that you did kedushin with, while she's still in her father's home. So says the Rambam that when are you going to be able to? V'yichud zeh. Oh, here we go. V'yichud zeh hu hanikra knisa l'chuppah, v'hu hanikra nisuin b'chol makom. Okay, that yichud is chuppah and needs to be yichud haroy labia. That's what the Rambam says just above in this line over here. V'afilu im kidsha b'bia asur lo lavo aleh b'bia shnia b'beis avia ad sheyava osa l'toch beiso v'yisyached ima. You have to have yichud with her, and he's defining it by yichud haroy labia. So how is it possible then for the Kohen Gadol to get married over here? This is what the Rambam says again over here. He says, "Afa pisha nivala v'hu shetiyeh ra'uya le bi'ila." So therefore, if she was a nida, aval im haisa nida, afa pisha nechnas aluchupa v'nisyachidima lo gamra nesuin. If she's a nida, so then the nesuin didn't work. Why? Because you can't have bia. The Rambam clearly assumes that the yichud needs to be yichud haroy labia. Moreover, we saw before. Remember, we saw the Mishnah.
If the Rambam was correct, you'd cancel the wedding, or you'd postpone the wedding.
So, no, practically we don't do that. Not even Sephardim do that. Although Rav Ovadia is pretty machmer about it, but practically speaking, we don't even do that. Not even Sephardim do that. But basically, there are certain aspects of the wedding that you have to do again. You don't do yichud, of course. In such a scenario, we have a child in the yichud room. It's
the child has to be old enough.
Yeah, it's a very, very tough spot to be in. during Corona times, I would assume that there's probably not that many chuppah snidas happening because the way that weddings are taking place, it's much easier to just push them off. But
Yeah, there's not 500 people coming in from out of town.
right, exactly. So this is the Rambam's definition of chuppah. So the problem is, number one, we pointed out from the Mishnah in Yuma. Number two, point out from the Mishnah right in our Masechta. Remember the Mishnah we saw before that defined Nesuin as her coming into the Rishus of the Baal. They don't have to have Yichud. You get 100 people in the house. As soon as she comes home, so then that's Nesuin. That's what the Mishnah said. So then what is this definition of Nesuin that the Rambam is referring to that defines Nesuin as Yichud Hariyah? So says Rav Naftali Trupp the following. I'll read you the language of Rav Naftali Trupp. It says Venira Loma.
Is that your thing or mine?
Oh, I don't know. If it's mine, I apologize. It is mine?
I don't know.
So hold on. Let me just let me make sure that all of my notifications are off. It says Naftali Trupp the following. With this, we'll close. According to the Rambam, there are two aspects of Nesuin. So before we said that there's Kiddushin and Nesuin, which are two things, either it's two separate things or it's the complete, Nesuin is the completion of Kiddushin. But even within Nesuin, there are two separate components. Ha'echad dekona osol Yerusha, v'litama, v'lenedarim, v'lemaisi yadeh, that there are the financial components of Nesuin. There's the financial components of Nesuin. Beis bezed dekona osa ledevarim shebeino lebeina. The second are the familial aspects of Nesuin, the relationship that is created through Nesuin. With regard to the financials of Nesuin, the fact that there are the technical aspects of her being your full wife now, that all you need is Mesiras Ha'av, l'shluchei habal. All you need there is for her to enter into your rishus. For something like that, for that aspect of Nesuin, you're considered married. However, you still are prohibited to live together until you have Yichud Aroy Labiyah, until you have Yichud that is enough for you to actually have Biyah. This is what the Rambam is saying.
But I mean, isn't that the definition of living together? It's like saying you can't live together until you can live together.
No, meaning that, no, she comes home. Meaning, if
she's in your home
house and there's other people there, as soon as she moves in and you haven't yet, she is your wife, full-fledged wife.
Yes, monetarily.
Monetarily. Meaning all of the ksuba kicks in, all of that kicks in, which is why it's going to work for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur also.
Because it's a monetary relationship. That's needs.
Even though you can't have Bia, meaning so therefore you can't have Yichud with her yet.
Yeah.
But still, if she technically moves into the house, if she enters into your rishus, then you are considered married. This is what Rav Naftali Trupp wants to point out from the Rambam. Okay, good. We'll stop right there.